I'm joined here today on the Croisette at the RFI studio by Tapiwa Chipfupa, who's from Zimbabwe. Welcome, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Rosslyn, for having me.
Well, you're here with the Fabrique, the Cinéma du Monde, which is organised each year at Cannes by the Institut Français, the French cultural institution, and other partners. And as a young filmmaker from outside of Europe, you're sharing the experience this year with filmmakers hoping to get a project into production. They're from Costa Rica, Egypt, Georgia, Iran, Morocco and the Philippines. Well, I'd like to talk to you a little bit later on about your experience with the Fabrique, but first of all I wanted to ask you about your documentary project, which has a clear literary reference. It's called The Other Half of the African Sky. Why did you choose that title?
It just came from where the project came from, which is from my heart, and the project is really primarily talking about the position of women in Zimbabwe. And in our language, women are mentioned as the other half of the sky. So for me, it was important to talk. I want to talk specifically about Zimbabwean women, so the other half of the African sky, you know, because I would still look at women in France as the other half of the sky as well, but it's coming from a Shona proverb, yeah.
But you also use your personal family life and experiences to talk about these issues of African women and specifically Zimbabwean women. How do you describe the position of Zimbabwean women in society today?
I think a lot of progress has been made since we have gotten our independence. There are many laws that say that we have particular things we're able to do, particular rights. But I think things from long ago, our tradition and culture, sometimes tend to override that, and that's what I want to discuss.
When you say override that, what do you mean exactly?
I mean, it's, I would say, for example, like the law says you can choose who you want to marry, but in terms of our society, it's up to your father figures, your father, to say yes or no when you are in a position to say you want to get married.
And you personally object to this? Have you had this experience yourself?
I think that's where the experience is stemming from, of wanting to be married and then facing all these cultural and traditional restrictions, making it almost seemingly impossible to get married.
Because in your family there was an objection to the person you wanted to marry, but on what grounds, if you don't mind me asking?
I think it's just, you know, families are very complicated, and obviously I don't want to give away too much of my project. It's using culture and tradition as a mechanism to determine a choice. And for me, it was really about how can my choice be determined by somebody else, because it is me who has to then live with that individual for the rest of my life, and feeling like, well, I should be able to make a choice. There was no really thought about, you know, what does the Constitution say or that. It was just really a feeling from my heart that I chose to follow my heart.
But so what does this say about gender politics more generally then in Zimbabwe?
I think it says that things are still complicated. I think we've put out what it is that we believe we should have as women, and the right steps have been taken. I don't take that away from my country, but I feel like it's a mindset, and dealing with a mindset is very hard. Yeah.
In 1980, when I was 3, my country was liberated from the white rule of Ian Smith's Rhodesia. She became Zimbabwe, and during the 80s flourished under the government of President Robert Mugabe. But then came 2 decades of political and economic meltdown. My story is about the separation of my family and our connection to the land.
Your documentary is personal on one hand, but political on the other.
Yeah.
Your previous film called The Bag on My Back speaks about the land reform, if I've understood correctly, but also how it directly affected your family.
Yeah.
So is it your style? Is that going to be your approach? Is that your trademark in a way, to broach these political subjects from a personal point of view? Is that more of a challenge? Does it stretch you? Why that choice?
You know, it's interesting you asked me that question, because I think it's probably the way I'm going to talk, but it's things that were on my heart. So for me, the first film was really about retracing my childhood and trying to understand my separation from my family in exile. And it so happened that it meant that I would be explore land reform and what happened to my country. But my ideas always come from a feeling I have from my heart, and they somehow seem to come in that way, yeah.
Now, the bag on my back, your take on the land reform did meet with criticism from some quarters in Zimbabwe, but then last year Robert Mugabe admitted that low production and underutilised farms reflected badly on the land policies. Is that so? Robert Mugabe actually agrees with you on this?
I'd never thought of it that way. I really made that film from, like I said, it came from a personal desire to solve something that I was struggling with, which is being separated from my family. I don't know whether to say it means he agrees with me, but it's interesting to hear you say that, yeah.
How are your films screened? Where are they screened? Where has, for example, The Bag on My Back been screened?
It's been screened primarily on international TV channels and at festivals. It hasn't yet really been screened in Zimbabwe, but a lot of people have had access to it via the international TV channels.
And you've therefore had mainly feedback from outside of Zimbabwe, although people in Zimbabwe clearly have seen it.
Yeah.
How does that feel to you? Obviously, one could imagine you would like more people to see it in Zimbabwe. Is there a chance of that happening?
I think it's every filmmaker's dream to hope that the film, where it's made and what it's about, is shown. I think via the platform that previous film has had, a lot of people have gotten to see it. A filmmaker always wants everybody to watch their film, but I think each film strikes a chord in different people, and I think the people that need to see it have seen it. Yeah.
So also, it would be seen on internet.
Yeah.
It's easily available.
Yeah.
But does it bother you that it's not seen on a bigger screen? If you made your film in thinking that it was going to be a big screen film?
I guess because it's had its run all over the world, I feel okay. There's a hope that, at some point I'll be able to screen it in my country.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about filmmaking conditions in Zimbabwe? That can't be a piece of cake. It's difficult in most countries for most people, and particularly young film directors. But particularly in Zimbabwe, how could you describe the filmmaking conditions today?
I would say it's very difficult because the facilities that we need to make quality films that go on an international platform are not yet available. We are still a baby in terms of an industry and trying to grow. So we come to places like Cannes to try to find, partners to help us to keep going forward. And also I think depending on the type of voice you have, you find that there's particular platforms that are suitable for your voice and some that are not. And it's navigating your way through those platforms and channels and finding your way. Sometimes it's very complicated to know, where do I take my film, who do I take it to, yeah.
Is there a lot of cooperation amongst countries in the region to try and pool their resources to help to promote the film industry, to get the film industry more on track? It's quite developed in South Africa, we know already.
Yeah, I would say people are trying to make inroads, but each country has its own set of complications, and each country will obviously be looking towards promoting their filmmakers, because we are all sort of in the emerging phase, trying to grow, trying to find our space. South Africa is obviously much more ahead than us, but I've had opportunities, whereas in my previous film had support from some organizations in South Africa. So I think it depends on the themes that you have and on what your subject matter is. Sometimes you can find a link, but I see more and more people are trying to link each other, to try to help each other to make films.
How has it been for you here at the Fabrique? You're here, I guess, like most of the other filmmakers involved in it, trying to find that financing that's so essential for making these films.
I think for me, coming from a country where we have a very small industry, it's been a fantastic opportunity. I say really I think is every filmmaker's dream. We all hope to have films play here and so on. So I guess this is the first step, and it's exciting and a lot of learning because of where I'm coming from. There's not as much to have access to information and to people. It's different when you send an email to somebody who doesn't know you than when you have a one-to-one with somebody, and then you can carry on the conversation. So this is like a very, very amazing opportunity for me.
Have you had particular interest from French producers? Being here at Cannes, there are a big, large number of them here.
Yes, I mean, we meet lots of people and there's lots of interest. I think the important thing now is to go back and to think to make a decision. That's what will be hard, like to make a decision, where do I place my project? Who do I put my projects in? Whose hands, do I put my project?
It's not just a question of the filmmaker just looking for a producer to give them the means to make the film. It's also the filmmaker has to decide which producer. They're all very different.
Yeah, I look at it as like getting married. You could marry everybody, but you need to marry the right person, because you spend sometimes the rest of your life, because some films have a long lifetime, and you don't want to be married to the wrong person.
And the interaction with the other young filmmakers here, I guess it's a big learning experience as well.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, we feed off each other, and I find like sometimes it's a very good thing to be in a hub where there's other filmmakers, because sometimes when we're each in our own countries trying to get something made, you forget, you feel kind of lost, and then you meet somebody else who's facing the same sort of road and you feel encouraged and you're ready to keep going.
Well, that's lovely. Well, thank you very much for speaking to us today, Tapiwa Chipfupa from Zimbabwe. It's been great to have you here in the studio in Cannes on the Croisette.